It is my pleasure and privilege to introduce our keynote speaker this morning. Mr. Jacob Hornberger is the founder and president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, a libertarian think tank based in Fairfax, Virginia. He was born and raised in Laredo, Texas, received a BA in economics from the Virginia Military Institute, and a law degree from the University of Texas. He served 3 terms on the platform committee of the Libertarian National Party, and he has spoken to Libertarian Party state conventions all over the country. He's also spoken on libertarianism in Canada, South America, and Europe. He's a hiker and a biker. He loves country music and opera. He will be addressing us today as a member of the Libertarian Party, not as a representative of the Future of Freedom Foundation. Bumper Hornberger.
What an exciting time. What an exciting time to be a libertarian. Just since our last convention, a front page story in the Wall Street Journal talking about how the libertarians and the Libertarian Party are at the cutting edge of the political debate in America. A front page story in Investor's Business Daily talking about how the libertarians and the Libertarian Party are wielding ever-increasing political clout in communities all across America. A front page story in USA Today talking about how the young people of the country, the Generation Xers, are calling themselves libertarians. Republicans embracing the libertarian label. The editor of the conservative magazine, The American Spectator, Emmett Terrell Jr., now calling himself a libertarian. The Democratic governor of the state of Colorado, Roy Romer, going on radio and announcing publicly that given a choice between the Libertarian Party and the Republican Party, he would go with the Libertarians any day of the week. But of course, there's the horror story. A Democratic president Bill Clinton actually having the audacity to describe himself as libertarian. In his dreams. Yes, my friends, it is terribly exciting to be a libertarian, and especially because of the times in which we live. Because everywhere you look, the beloved welfare state of the Democrats and the Republicans is in crisis. And that's exciting. Social Security, busted. Oh, yes, they tell us, oh, but there's a trust fund. You put your money in it. It earns interest. It's there for you when you retire. At least the young people are facing reality. There never was a trust fund. It's been a lie since the very beginning. Now, what else is new? Social Security is a straight stealing process, where the Internal Revenue Service steals money from the young and the productive to whom the money belongs, in order to feather the nest of those to whom the money does not belong. And it's busted. Medicare and Medicaid, busted. Health care costs are soaring because of Medicare and Medicaid expenditures. Doctors everywhere are disgusted. Many of them are retiring early because of disgust. And the quality of health care continues to dive. Busted. Public schooling, welfare for the middle class, busted. And of course, well, the best evidence of failure on public schooling, of course, is how government officials themselves refuse to send their own children to these government institutions. Like Bill Clinton and his daughter Chelsea. And like an ever-growing number of public school teachers who are taking their own children out of the public school system. Busted. And look at the beloved wars that have been waged against the American people by these Remocrats and Republicans. That's what the Wall Street Journal calls them. Because there ain't a dime's worth of difference between those two parties, and we all know it. They share the same commitment to these failed policies, the same commitment to these failed wars that they have waged against their own people. The beloved war on poverty, 30 long years. And what do they tell us? That there's more hunger, homelessness, and poverty in America than ever before. That's supposed to be progress? There's the beloved war on drugs. Oh, wait. That one's been a big success after 80 years? Well, it's been a success for those who have benefited from it. Drug lords, politicians, and bureaucrats. Right now, there are DEA officers and local sheriffs and deputies out on the highways and airports of this country, robbing innocent people, taking their cash, taking their belongings under these so-called asset forfeiture laws. They don't even charge them with a crime. They're trying to feather the nest of their police departments and circumvent the taxing processes of this country. My gosh, my friends, even the German officials in the 1930s went through the pretense of charging innocent people with crimes before they robbed them of their valuables. Now, our officials just say, sue us if you don't like it. And anyway, we make a new record drug bust every month or so. And that's supposed to be evidence of progress? After 80 years? There's the beloved war on bigotry. That's been a big winner. Well, look, let's be positive, okay? I mean, let's look at the bright side of the war on bigotry. No negative campaigning. At least they have wiped out bigotry in Washington, D.C. I got a feeling that y'all have a terrible attitude about government. Look, it's true. They've really wiped out all bigotry in our nation's capital, this model city in our great society. It's true. Well, okay. Unless you're attending a 4th of July barbecue this afternoon at the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. And isn't it great Isn't it great to see Dole and Clinton up there anguishing and despairing on how they're going to fix their beloved welfare state and their beloved wars? You know, we're going to have tax reform, we promise, welfare reform, educational reform, regulatory reform. It's the same old reform claptrap we get from these parties every single election. This is what's so great about being a libertarian. And do we anguish? Do we despair over the moral and the economic bankruptcy of these beloved wars and this welfare state? Oh, God, not on your life. On the contrary, this is a time of great joy, of great celebration for us libertarians. We'd be depressed if the whole damn thing had worked. You see, because it shows us that God has indeed created a consistent universe. Or as Ayn Rand would put it, that A is A. A bad tree will always bear rotten fruit, and you can tell a tree by the fruit it bears, and this is the fruit of the welfare state of the Democratic and Republican tree. And my friends, my libertarian friends, they cannot say that we didn't tell them that this would happen, because we did tell them so, and they know we told them. 50 years ago, Friedrich Hayek wrote his monumental book, The Road to Serfdom. It was recently republished in a 50th anniversary edition. Hayek, of course, was a libertarian. In fact, one of his most famous essays is Why I Am Not a Conservative. He would go on to win the Nobel Memorial Prize in Economic Science. And he dedicated the road to serfdom to the socialists in all political parties, including the socialists in the Republican Party and the socialists in the Democratic Party. And Hayek said to them, if you continue traveling this road that you have now embarked upon, the road to the socialistic welfare state, the road to serfdom, you're going to end up with the same mindset, the same policies as the totalitarians that you profess to oppose. And what did the Democrats and Republicans say in response? They said to the American people, you don't need to listen to Hayek. Don't listen to the libertarians. 1971. 25 years ago, that year marked the founding of our party, the Libertarian Party, the party of principle, the third largest political party in America. Recall the first presidential campaign, 1972, when John Hospers ran for president on the Libertarian Party ticket. When John was reminding us that the socialistic welfare state constituted an abandonment of the moral and economic principles on which our nation had been founded. Reminding us that for over 125 years, Americans had said no to Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, public schooling, welfare, farm subsidies, and all of the other socialistic ideas that were originating in Europe. And still they said, don't listen to the Libertarians. There was the next presidential campaign, that of Roger McBride. When Roger reminded us that the socialistic welfare state would cause poverty and destitution, and that it would especially hurt those at the bottom of the economic ladder. That through such socialistic devices as occupational licensure laws, minimum wages, economic regulations, progressive income taxation, welfare, and the like, you would especially hurt those in the inner cities of America. And still they said, don't listen to the Libertarians. The third presidential campaign, that of Ed Clark. In 1980, when 1 million American voters cast their ballot in favor of the Libertarian Party candidate for president, Ed Clark. When Ed was reminding us that the socialistic welfare state would ultimately create a mindset of permanent dependency among the American people on this welfare state opium. To the point where Americans would ultimately say, how could we live without Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, public schooling, welfare? How could you possibly turn these things over to the free market? Clark was reminding us that what would be destroyed were the traditional American values of self-reliance, independence, the can-do attitude, mutual cooperation between people, the idea of voluntary charity. And still they said, don't listen to the Libertarians. And then there was the presidential campaign of David Bergland. When David was reminding us of the principles of liberty, the principles of libertarianism, when he said that individuals have the fundamental inherent right to live their lives any way they want, even if it's immoral, even if it's irresponsible, as long as their conduct is peaceful. So that government punishes murderers, rapists, thieves, and the like, but otherwise leaves the rest of us alone. And still they said, don't listen to the Libertarians. And then there was the presidential campaign of Ron Paul. Who, much to the chagrin of the Republican Party regulars, recently won a bitterly contested election for the Republican nomination to Congress. When Ron Paul was running for president in 1988 on the Libertarian Party ticket, he was reminding us that the free society, the Libertarian society, is the society that's the economically prosperous society, and especially for those at the bottom of the economic ladder. That it is through the accumulation of capital that wages rise. Reminding us that it is the free society that provides hope and opportunity, especially to those in the inner cities of America, to compete against those who have already accumulated wealth. And still they said, don't listen to the Libertarians. And then there was the most recent presidential campaign, that of Andre Marou 4 years ago. When Andre was reminding us that the free society, the Libertarian society, is the society where people are exercising choices, deciding between responsible, irresponsible, moral, immoral, exercising their free will, exercising their sense of conscience, and that therefore it is this society that nurtures and develops the values that all of us hold dear. The compassion that one feels for somebody in trouble, the reaching out to somebody who needs a helping hand, the honoring of one's mother and father, but always and only on a voluntary basis. And still they said, don't listen to the libertarians. And you know, my friends, what's sad about all this? I mean, yes, it's sad that they were telling people not to listen to us as their policies were causing more and more destruction among the American people. And it's sad that today these Democrats and Republicans, after causing this destruction, will not take responsibility for what they've wrought on the people of this country. But what's really pathetic about it all is how they look for scapegoats on which to blame the problems that they caused. And of course, their most popular scapegoat for both parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, is the immigrant. The person who is unable to defend himself. Oh, if we could only keep illegal aliens out of our society, our public schools, our public welfare, our public parks, our public hospitals, our public roads, why, we could save the beloved welfare state. Oh, build the walls around America, save us. Have you ever noticed how it's only the public sector that complains about too many customers? Y'all have a real bad attitude about government. My friends, did you ever think you'd see the day when Cuban refugees fleeing communist tyranny would spend a year and a half of their lives in an American penitentiary? Many of them, they deserve to be hissed. Many of them, of these immigrants, in that year and a half, trying to climb over the American wall on Clinton's side of Cuba, in order to find what they felt would be greater freedom back on Castro's side of Cuba. And even that is not the worst of it. Some 30 years ago, these two parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, sent 60,000 men of my generation, including some of my schoolmates at Virginia Military Institute, to their deaths in one of these beloved foreign wars that these Democrats and Republicans are so enamored with. And notice how they extol the virtues of their two modern-day heroes, their joint heroes. The two men who sent those 60,000 people to their deaths on a pack of lies and deception, Lyndon Johnson and Richard Nixon. You know, don't you find it interesting that, especially nowadays, these Republican and Democratic so-called leaders, they show so much courage and so much bravery when it comes to sending young men and women into combat thousands of miles away. But when it comes to these leaders themselves entering the arena of debate with us libertarians, they've got a yellow streak down their backs a mile wide. What were the Pentagon and the military-industrial complex telling us 30 years ago when the body bags were coming home on a daily basis? Oh, it's necessary because we don't want to see people suffering under communism. Yeah, right. As if it had nothing to do with the budgets and the profits that were being made by the Pentagon and the military-industrial complex. And the sham of it all, The farce of it all is exposed 30 years later, when the military-industrial complex and the Pentagon are using their military power in the forcible repatriation of Cuban refugees into communist tyranny. That's right. That's right, my friends. American military personnel, as I speak, working mano a mano with their Cuban Communist Coast Guard comrades in the forcible return of Cuban people back into communist tyranny. American military bayonets, M16s, in the guts of Cuban women and children as they left these leaky little rafts, pushing and prodding them back onto those communist vessels for forcible return to Cuba. This is the mindset Hayek was talking about. The socialistic totalitarian mindset that sees nothing wrong with this. And remember, this from a Democratic president and a Democratic Party who love the poor, the needy, and the disadvantaged. Isn't that what they always tell us when we attack their beloved welfare state programs? For example, some of you have had public housing projects built in your community by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Well, what's the first thing they say to you when you're trying to defend the equity in your home, the value, your middle-class land values from these drug-infested centers of violence? You must hate the poor. You must be a racist. Yeah, right. As if it had nothing to do with the bribes and the payoffs and the profits being made by mayors, city councilmen, zoning officers, HUD officials, land developers, and all. And all of the other poverty pimps who are making their money off this junk. My friends, I guarantee you, you could search the bowels of communist China, North Korea, Vietnam, Cuba, Mexico, and I guarantee you, you'd never find a more corrupt, maggot-infested organization as HUD. Oh, but wait, where are the Republicans? Oh, they preach moral values. They write the book of virtues. They quote the Bible. For example, Republicans will say to you, Jesus our Lord said, "Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, thy soul, and thy mind." This is the first and the great commandment. And the second is just like the first. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. And when you ask a Republican, how do you reconcile that with what you are doing to these poor Cuban people and forcing them back into communist tyranny? You know what the Republicans' response always is? We can't take the Bible too literally. My friends, this is one of the reasons why it's so great to be a libertarian. Unlike these two other parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, we take great pride in the Statue of Liberty. This is why she is... This is why Lady Liberty is on our masthead. She appears on all our stationery, on our platforms, on our awards. Send us your tired, your huddled, your poor masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shores, and we libertarians will embrace them. We will never abandon them. We will never forsake them. We will never turn our backs on them. I'm really embarrassed. I'm really sorry. I just realized that I had not talked about the most monumental event in the history of our country. The Republican Revolution. What a farce that turned out to be. Now, remember when the Republicans were talking about dismantling the New Deal programs, dismantling Lyndon Johnson's Great Society programs, abolishing the departments of Education, Commerce, Energy, the IRS, the NEA, economic regulations? Where did it all go? It was the same old Republican claptrap they've used in every campaign just to get votes. And the problem happened this time when they won unexpectedly both houses of Congress. They got flushed out in the open like a covey of South Texas quail. You know when that revolution fizzled out? 3 weeks after the election. No, really, when the two presidential candidates for the other parties, Bill Dole and Bob Clinton, got to... It was an accident. It's just that y'all have a real bad attitude about government. Look, you can exchange the names, you can exchange the faces, you can exchange the party labels, and every single American deep down in his heart knows there ain't a dime's worth of difference between Dole and Clinton. Did you see what Dole said a few weeks ago about what his 3 proudest accomplishments were? I mean, I swear to you, this is true. You can look it up. He says, my 3 proudest accomplishments in my 35 years in Washington: food stamps, farm subsidies, and certain government regulations. Those could be Clinton's. You know, if Dole were smart, I mean, look, he's losing, what, 17% in the polls? If he were smart, he'd approach Clinton and cut a deal. No, look. Here's the deal. Clinton agrees to drop Gore from the ticket and replace him with Dole. They're flip sides of the same coin. They're 2 peas in a pod. They're 2 wings of the same party. And to prove it, these 2 ideological bedmates, Clinton and Dole, get together, along with their buddy Alan Greenspan, head of the Federal Reserve System, the agency. They deserve to be booed and hooted too. The agency that has debased our currency for umpteen decades and plundered and looted the American people. And then they did it again. The 3 of them got together and plundered $50 billion from the American people and sent it down in the form of a gigantic welfare payment, this loot, to some political hacks in the Republic of Mexico. Where was the congressional vote? Where were the stalwart defenders of the Constitution among the Republican revolutionaries? You know, the separation of powers, you know, the constitutional authority of Congress to levy taxes on the American people, to decide the expenditure of tax revenues. Oh, they had run for cover. And these 3 people on their own did this. Do you realize, my friends, that the German chancellor in the 1930s was begging the Reichstag for that kind of power? The power to rule by decree without the consent of the elected representatives of the German people? But no, they said send it down $50 billion to Mexican politicians and bureaucrats who we all know did not use that $50 billion to line their own pockets, because they're honest and they're honorable down there. They don't live off bribes and payoffs. They don't put the mordida on people, the bite. They don't have Swiss bank accounts, and we all know they don't engage in the drug trade. It was the most horrific abuse of political power, at least one of the most horrific abuses in history. And then Clinton and Dole have the audacity, the gall, to stand before the American people after doing this to them and saying, well, if you vote for the Libertarians, you're just going to be wasting your vote. If you want your vote to count, you're going to have to vote for one of us. How much more could you insult the self-esteem of the American people than that after doing that to them? I mean, my friends, it's like two rapists standing over their victim and smiling and saying, well, we know you didn't like what we did to you, but you really don't have a choice. You're going to have to hug one of us. And what better way to waste your vote than to vote for one of those two characters? It's only going to encourage them. And what about when they had the opportunity to shut down all of the non-essential functions of government? I mean, this was a libertarian dream. This is what we have been fighting for 25 years. We would not have negotiated any increase in that debt ceiling. If it's a ceiling, why do you throw it away? But no, Mr. Revolutionary Bob Dole says, oh, we need to feel sorry for my constituents, the Washington bureaucrats. Why, poor things, they're at home without work, with pay. Feel sorry for them? Is this guy for real? I mean, are we supposed to feel sorry for a tick when we pull him off our neck? Are we supposed to love him and caress him and say, poor tick, poor tick? I mean, give me a break. These Washington bureaucrats have been sucking our lifeblood out of us since at least the day we were born. I mean, how much is the Internal Revenue Service taking from us now through their terror? You know, 45% of people's income? I mean, you know, you look at the serfs in the Middle Ages. They were required to deliver 1/3 of their crops to their masters. And you know, and you sit there and say, God, poor people, nothing. They had it good. Americans are having to take, you know, close to one half of their crops and give it to their masters. I mean, give me a break, Mr. Dole. How about a little sympathy for the taxpayers of this country, the people who have borne the burden of these bureaucrats? You know, some of us that would like to use that money to maybe remodel our homes, maybe help with our children's education, college education, maybe buy a new car, maybe a little bit nicer vacation. Give me a break. And don't you love it when these Washington bureaucrats say, well, we pay taxes too. I mean, they have no idea of the burden, why Americans can't even stand up straight anymore because the tax burden on their backs is so heavy. Or when these Washington bureaucrats say, yeah, but the trouble with you libertarians is that you want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Rosemary's Baby. Y'all have a real bad attitude when it comes to government. Where was Gingrich in all this? You know, the big revolutionary. He was over there whining and crying that the press was distorting their position. We're not cutting any government programs. We're not cutting Meals on Wheels. Stop saying we are. We're increasing them at only 8% instead of the Democratic 10%. How pathetic can you get? No wonder Republican candidates are embarrassed to be seen with him now. No wonder they've sent him into hiding. You know, imagine if Dole Gingrich and Army had been leading the American Revolution. No, look, here's the picture. Here's the picture. The three amigos galloping up on the 4th of July, 1776, to meet with Washington and Jefferson and Madison. Stop the shooting, fellas. The revolution's over. We've won. Washington says, what do you mean? Dole, I sat down with King George and I cut a deal. What's the deal? The deal is this. King George has agreed to expand his taxes and his regulations over us by only 8% a year. You know, come to think of it, we might have been better off under King George than under these Democrats and Republicans. What a farce it all was. My friends, we've had a lot of fun in 25 years. We had some struggles, but we've had a good time. You know, these Democrats, their worst fear is that somewhere somebody's making money, and the Republicans' worst fear is that somebody somewhere is having fun. Maybe that's why they don't like us, because we like to do both. My friends, we've come a long way, and we have a right to pat ourselves on the back for our successes. But what has distinguished us so much is the commitment to the purity of our principles. For 25 years, even among our enemies, we have been known as the party of principle. And it is so vitally important that regardless of what the American people choose to do in this election, whether it's to exercise their free will in embracing the failed socialistic policies of the past, the policies of the Democrats and the Republicans, or whether it's choosing to join up with us, our message to the American people must be the same as it has been for 25 years. If you want to see the end, not the reform, of the socialistic welfare state way of life, hearken to us. If you want to see the end, not the reform, of the Internal Revenue Service and the 16th Amendment, hearken to us. If you want to see the end, not the reform of the Departments of Education, Agriculture, HUD, Health and Human Services, and every single other department that takes money from those to whom it belongs in order to feather the nest of those to whom it does not belong, hearken to us. If you want to see the end, not the reform of the Departments of Labor, Energy, Commerce, OSHA, the DEA, and every single other agency that has sent its swarms of regulators across our land like a swarm of locusts, eating out our substance, harassing us, hearken to us. And if you want to see the end, if you want to see the end, if you want to see the end, not the reform, of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. Yes, if you never again want to see these murderous, Gestapo, bigoted thugs entrapping innocent people, if you never again want to see deadly gas being used against innocent women and children, if you never again want to see an innocent woman having her head exploded apart by a federal sniper using a bullet paid for with your tax money, if you never again want to see federal officials being awarded medals of valor after shooting a 14-year-old boy in the back, if you never again want to see FBI cover-ups, perjury, obstruction of justice, and the keeping of files on the American people in case you get out of line, if you're sick and tired of the direction which this nation has taken under these Democrats and Republicans, if you believe in the principles of morality and liberty on which this nation was founded, if you believe that the Constitution is one of the most important documents in history, if you believe in free minds and free markets, hearken to us. Join us. We need your help. We cannot do this by ourselves. Join us, the Libertarian Party, the third largest political party in America, in perhaps the most exciting, grandest endeavor in history, the restoration of American liberty. My libertarian friends, these Democrats and Republicans like to say to us, they say, why do you libertarians keep fighting? You know, we've beat you handily in election after election. You know we've got you badly outnumbered. They have yet to learn the lessons of history. For history has shown that a relatively small force of determined, persevering individuals, standing on principle and struggling to be free, will at some point in the battle easily defeat the much larger force of pessimistic, dispirited people whose only mission in life is to satisfy their insatiable thirst for more power over the lives and fortunes of more human beings. My libertarian friends, it is true, they do have us still badly outnumbered. They might even have us surrounded. But who in the hell can doubt that it is we who have them on the run? For the first time in 25 years, the Democrats and the Republicans are finally saying to the American people, perhaps it is time to start listening to the libertarians. And so, my friends, now is the time to redouble our efforts. Now is the time to continue persevering. Now is the time to remain on the offensive. Now is the time to take the battle to them. If we do this, the question is not whether liberty will once again prevail in this great land of ours. The only question is when. My libertarian friends, this has indeed been a century of darkness. But when the history of the 20th century is ultimately written, the historians will undoubtedly record that there was one small beacon of light, a light of hope, and that hope shone through you. They will undoubtedly write that it was the Libertarians and the Libertarian Party of the United States who led not just America, who led mankind through the darkness, out of the socialistic morass, off of the road to serfdom, and up onward to the highest reaches of freedom ever seen by man.
I can show you the world. Shine